All right, guys, we're ready to go.
Hey Ron, Ben Standard with The Athletic. Just curious your thoughts on Dwayne today. How did he look and how did he progress in day two?
Well, there's some good things. You watch him go through his progression, his reads, and do the things that he needs to do, and then a couple times you see him, not going through his progressions. Not keeping the right tempo or the right pace to it. So just little detail things that again, he's still learning or growing. We're pretty excited about that. So.
And I feel like we're going to keep asking you about Alex and what's the next step. Obviously, the goal is to get him on the field. What is the exact next step? The thing you want to see is it footwork, mental part. What is the thing for him, the next step?
The biggest thing with him is always going to be about the footwork, the quick feet, making quick decisions, stuff like that. We've got to watch that, and we've got to see how he's moving. Again, he's getting a simulated pocket with 7-on-7. The next move will be probably what we have is our 9-on-9, which is a half line pass rush versus a 7-on-7. So he gets the feel and sense of now guys coming at him. At least in that drill, he'll know exactly where it's coming from. So we can watch his movements as he escapes. So with him, again, everything's a process. Everything's a step forward. Everything's about his foot speed, his quickness, and his decision making. And again, he's done a great job.
Thank you.
Hey Ron, in terms of Ryan Anderson, obviously this is a big year for him. It's his contract year. He's moved to a different position. What are you on the coaching staff looking for exactly with them, especially in such a crowded defensive line?
Well, again, one thing that we've talked about is our rotation, is how many guys we're going to use and how many guys we're going to play each game, and he fits right into the rotation. Whether he ends up, be a rotational player or a starter, he's a guy that has a very good, a very diverse set of skill sets. He can put his hand in the ground and rush. He can get in 2-point stand and play a linebacker position. He can rush off the 2-point, and he can drop into coverage off the 2-point. So he gives us some flexibility in terms of where to use him, where to move him, and the things that he can do for us. He's done a great job. He really has. He's had a solid camp, and we feel pretty comfortable with who he is for us going into this season.
You talked to us earlier about how important these reps are with such a condensed off season right now, and I
Yep.
noticed that Chase Young was off on the sideline,
Yep.
especially for a rookie. How important is it when you don't have some of the reps that he was off for some of the one-on-one stuff, some of the 11 stuff? How important is it for him to get back into it? Especially.
Sorry, Rihanna. It's very important for a young player, especially now in the developmental stages of his career. He's come in, he's done some great things, he's done everything we've asked, and we had to kind of be careful with him today. He's got a little bit of a hip flexor, so we wanted to be smart. We'll see how he is tomorrow, but he's done a really good job. He really has. But the more reps he gets, the quicker he's going to adapt and get used to the things that we're trying to do as a football team.
Thank you, Ron. I know you said stuff about the injury, so I appreciate you for that one.
No, you're welcome, Rihanna.
Hey Ron, I was curious about Jerron Christian. What was kind of your initial impression of him, and what have you kind of observed the last few days?
Well, the biggest thing with Jerron, more so than anything else, is he's an athletic football player. I mean, he moves very well. He's a smart young man who's picked things up very nicely, and he just hadn't had a chance to play a lot of football. So we're real interested in watching him, especially if he's going to play and participate and do the things that he's done. He's done some really good things, so he's caught our attention. He's had a couple opportunities to play with the ones recently, and so we're getting a good feel for what he's capable of. And again, we'll rotate these guys in. We'll rotate the guys that are the ones and the twos and the threes just to see what we have and see what the best combination of players is on the field.
And then with Chase Young, I know you don't talk about injuries, but it seemed like he was a little bit out of teamwork. Was that just cautious move on your guys' part, or is that anything?
Yes, it's more caution than it was anything. As I told Rihanna, we got a little bit of a hip flexor there, and you got to be smart. You don't want to overwork him, wear him down, and next thing you know, he's going to miss 4 or 5 days. So we're just trying to be smart about that.
Hey Ron, this lining outside, I don't know what's the line there to make sure you get that outside work that you prefer, but also not risk guys and injuries and that kind of thing.
Well, what we did was yesterday, later in the late afternoon, early evening, our grounds crew covered up the field, and as Paul Kelly monitored the weather forecast, we determined that if we held out and started a little bit later today, we'd have an opportunity to get a clear field, and for the most part we did. We took the covering off the practice field right around 8 o'clock, which allowed us to start a little bit after 9:30, or actually right around 9:30, and the field was dry for the most part. So we were able to get some good work, and we prefer to be outside if you can, but we don't want to do it at the risk of anybody potentially slipping and pulling something or twisting something. So again, I thought our grounds crew did an outstanding job having the field prepped and ready to go today.
Aaron, we've talked a lot about Alex Smith coming back from this injury, but Bryce Love obviously went through a major injury too. How impressed are you by this kid and kind of the work he's put in, and where do you see him fitting into your backfield?
Well, I really do appreciate how hard Bryce has worked in the offseason in terms of his rehab program, and from where he's come, it's been amazing to watch. He's done a great job. Very smart, bright football player, loves the game, works hard at it. He's a guy that's multidimensional. I mean, at Stanford, he didn't have to do a lot of routes and pass catching, but he's very capable, and we're beginning to see that. So, this is a guy that could be an every down back for you. He's an explosive, dynamic player, good quickness. He's exciting with the ball in his hand. So we'll see how he continues to progress and get better. And he has an opportunity to help and contribute on this football team, though.
Ron, what have you seen out of Reuben Foster so far since he's come off PUP? Has he progressed since you've played?
He has. The one thing about Reuben's situation, the one thing about Alex's situation and Bryce's is you can't simulate the movement that you're going to make on a football field in rehab. And so that's why each one of those guys has progressed to where we've had them active. Bryce was a little bit ahead of Reuben. Reuben was a little bit ahead of Alex. And so each one of those guys are progressing at their own pace. And it's really about being exposed to the football movements that's going to help make those muscles and nerves and tendons and ligaments stronger and more secure. And that's why you have to gradually bring these guys along. I don't know if you noticed, but Reuben's got a limited number of reps. We've tried to really monitor those and keep an eye on it. And it's the same thing with Alex. With Bryce, like I said, being ahead of these guys, I think Bryce is back in now, getting full participation, and so we're seeing growth from Bryce, and hopefully we'll start seeing even more so from Reuben, and then eventually from Alex.
With Alex, at some point, obviously, he's got to take a hit. How do you plan for that? You don't want that to be in the game, I'm assuming. Would you have him come out and work with the defensive side of the ball? How do you approach that?
Well, as I said a little bit earlier, the biggest thing with him is reintroducing him to 11-on-11 football. Right now we've got him out there doing 7-on-7. The next step would, we'd probably having him do 9-on-7 and 9-on-9 drills, where he knows where the pressure is coming from, so he can anticipate moving from it. And then once we put him into 11-on-11, it's again, now your natural ability has to kick into play. Your experience, your feel and sense for what's going on will have to come into play. And that's kind of where we're hoping to progress to eventually, and see if he's still capable of doing it.
But when you say eventually, do you think that could be accomplished at this year's training camp?
Oh, I believe so, but I'm not going to put a timeline on it. Again, this has been a work in progress, and we're not trying to hurry anybody through. So that's why there is no timeline as far as that's concerned. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, he can go in there, and if he has to play, he can protect himself.
Hi, Ron. Sam Fortier with the Washington Post. We noticed today a little bit, we got a sense of your coaching staff and the energy they can bring kind of in the morning, vocal guys like Chris and Pete and John. I wonder, how important is it for you to see that energy, to see those guys getting guys up in the morning?
Well, I think, again, it's really about trying to set the tone so we can set the tempo. That's more so than anything else. If we sit there and we just kind of meander about, the players are going to meander about. The players are going to feed off the energy that you have, and that's important. It's important for us to try and do the best we can to set the tone and tempo for those guys so they can go out there and get themselves moving, and and then they can take ownership. They can get themselves motivated, get themselves moving.
And as far as mixing and matching, seeing what you have for position groups, how do you balance seeing what you have and also allowing players, position groups to develop chemistry?
Well, I think there is a certain point where we'll get together as coaches, and after certain periods, we've come together, talked about what we have, and each coach will kind of let us know, let me know as to who they're rotating around and moving and putting into place, and asking if is there anything else I want to see, or is there anybody else I want to see with these guys, and that's the important thing, is that everybody's getting a look right now. And eventually we'll get to the point where, hey, these are the top 15 guys on offense and defense, and these are guys that have to be in the rotation. These are guys that have to get opportunities. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We will eventually. We will very soon. But right now we're trying to really gauge what we have as football players.
Hey Ron, John Guy, ESPN. When you talked yesterday about the young quarterbacks going through progressions and kind of getting their bodies in sync and all that, what is usually the result when they don't? Is there a couple times that you see maybe playing a little bit high on some throws? Is that a function of that?
Yes.
Or is that something else?
Yes, and for the most part, whether the ball's behind or the ball's too far in front or the ball's too high or too low, that is really a function of not being where your body not being where it needs to be to throw that specific throw you want to make. Sometimes the eye sees it before the rest of the body sees it, and so the ball is going to be late. Sometimes the body's ahead of the eyes, and all of a sudden you bring the eyes, you throw it too soon, and you get way out in front. I mean, there's all these little nuances to the position. And to be honest, I'm learning them. I continue to learn them. I don't coach the quarterbacking position, but I've gotten a good feel for it, having worked with rookie quarterbacks before. And so you look for those things where, making sure that the elements in his body are all in sync. And it always starts with the head. You watch the eyes. As the eyes move, are the shoulders moving? Are the hips moving? Are the feet moving? I mean, he comes back this way, and you're trying to see if he's turning in pieces or if he's turning in unison. So those are things that we look for as coaches.
And then also, Ron, back to Alex, you said you don't have a timetable necessarily. So how will you gauge when he's ready to take that next step?
Well, based on things that he'll do in practice. We'll again, as we observe, watch the feet. Again, it's we'll see it. We'll recognize it. We'll notice it.
Thank you.
All right.
Chris Russell. Les.
Hey Ron, wanted to ask quickly about Alex also. I maybe you said this before, I don't remember, but did you ever have like a sit down and then talk with him about here are the risks of you coming back, here's what I'm concerned about? Did that conversation ever take place?
Yes, the biggest thing that happened in the conversation was Alex and I, we talked, and I said to Alex, the biggest thing is you have to be able to protect yourself. You got to be able to show us that you can protect yourself. That's the thing. For me to sit there and say what his physical risks are, I'm not the doctor. And again, we listened to what the doctor told us. Again, you don't ever want to put a player at risk, and that's really more so what I'm concerned with is that I'm not putting him at risk, based on my judgment. I just want to make sure at the end of the day, based on what I've seen, based on what I've heard, we can sit there and make the right decision to whether play him or not.
When did that conversation take place, and did you have any kind of advice for him in that? Did you have your own opinion you wanted to interject on it or not?
No, we've had that conversation a couple of times. It's taken a different, we've had that conversation taken at different times. We've had it, and it's just been reiterated and reinforced.
Chris, you can jump back in.
Hey Ron, it's Chris Ross from 106.7 FM and SI.com. Sorry about that. Defensive line, I think most people would agree, is the strength of this defense, maybe the strength of the overall roster. Can you talk about anybody that may have jumped out to you the last couple of days since we've been out here? It looks like Ryan B did pretty good in one-on-ones, and maybe Brownford yesterday a little bit. Anybody jump out to you?
We've had some young guys that have really stepped up and played well, and and again, they're getting their opportunities. I've been very pleased with the effort we're getting across the board, more so than anything else, and that's probably the most important thing is how they've practiced, how they've performed, and a lot of guys have done some good things. To start drawing conclusions based on the first couple of days would be a little premature. So, as we continue to evaluate as a coaching staff, we'll get a much better feel within a week or two.
We got time for two more. Anything else?
Hey Ron, Rivera, Scott Abraham, ABC 7. Reading last week that the Buffalo Bills actually reached out to Joe Gibbs to get some advice about kind of how to handle coaching in such a unique season. Wondering if you actually reached out to Coach Gibbs or anybody else for that matter to maybe get some advice on how to handle such a unique season, such a unique setting.
I'm constantly talking to different coaches for advice on how to handle things. This is a very unique set of circumstances across the board. I've played in '87 during a unique situation when Coach Gibbs was a head coach, and when Coach ended up winning the Super Bowl, which was amazing when you think about that. And then in 2011, having been a head coach during the lockout, I've had a little bit of perspective as well. So, there's been a number of guys I've reached out, a number of guys I've talked to, and guys that have given me some insight into things.
Last one, Heather McDonough.
Hey Coach, Heather McDonough, NBC4. I appreciate you answering all the questions about Alex because I know there are a lot. How those conversations with him, are you having them like with maybe Bryce Love and Reuben Foster, the injured guys? Kind of how often and how much are you relying on those guys to be open and honest with you about how they're feeling, how they're progressing, and balancing that excuse me, with what you're seeing on the field? But again, like kind of more hearing from those guys specifically and relying on both that honesty.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is you do have to rely on the honesty because you really don't know. Nobody can tell you what another player's feeling, and that's always been the hard thing. That's why you have to trust them and believe them, and that's what we're doing now is we're trusting them and believing them. That these guys are, hey, I'm doing fine, my leg feels good, or this doesn't bother me. So that's trust, and so until we're proven differently, you want to trust them and take them for their word.